So I guess I'll just read from the new book, Worship the Pig, and start with the prefatory poem, the opening poem, which I always think is an important one because the person in the bookstore can take a look and decide if they want the book or to quickly close it and put it back. And this poem is called When It's Done Right, which is a phrase taken from the epigraph by Mary Oliver, which is, and that happiness when it's done right is a kind of holiness. This morning you are crazy in love with the heat on your legs, sun cure to welts on ankles. As flies and chiggers have also been lately enraged with joy. You listen to the breeze with a lazy rapture, to the river on its cold journey. How snow shapes on the mountain have changed these last weeks. Lunging dragon replaced by a kitten in a necktie. The cough of a tractor engine is acceptable, as is the rooster's mistime reveille. Even the plaintive call of raven. No schematic for conquest, no reckless conclusions. No tenuous argument of connection beyond the simple truth of what accrues together. A dull day ahead of free of usefulness. Say this is doing it right. This resume of sun, light, breeze, of bare legs, silted creek, bird call unanswered. This singular moment brimming with nothing special and having happily forgotten what you needed to say. The comment about the Americas book, I've been lucky to travel and do a lot of residencies, but this book was written, a big portion of it was written in Alaska, and then an even larger section, most recent section was written in Brazil, and then most of the rest are out here at the house, log cabin in Tennessee. That all seems like a different world now. There hasn't been a lot of traveling lately, but I'll get back to that. I suppose any book called Worship the Pig has to have an obligatory poem about bacon in it, and I do have one, so let's just see how that goes. This is called Solution to a Morning of Little Possibility, Frying Bacon. Get the big skillet from its hook, peel off one ungent strip at a time, butchered and cured down the road by some old boys who worship the pig. I load that thing up over medium-high heat. Get your hands greasy, deep in the pores, stand over it, working the rhythms until your glasses steam, your tongue's wagging in a wet mouth. Let it splatter, let it burn, stain, and make an ungodly mess. Forget about the menu. Bacon takes care of bacon. The unctuous agency of pork, the holy salt flesh and sweet fat, better than Jesus and Elvis rolled together. Get the whole house smelling good, the dog on high alert. Damn it, son, this may be the best day of your wasted life. I just found out that a local arts group is going to put this on one of their months of their 2022 poetry calendar, which is kind of interesting and cool, but I am wondering what the illustration is going to look like, you know. I did write a cookbook memoir, so food still stays pretty prevalent in some of the poems. My father died earlier this year, and we were very, very close. So I'm going to read a poem called The Work that I wrote for him some time ago, although I doubt that he read it. I think it's pretty much self-explanatory. It's always on your own. No theory, no choice, no skill set, but necessity. Always the crew and no show after guarantees. Not a word, not a kiss my ass. Always the wrong tools for the wrong job. Worn blade, crowbar, bag of bolts and screws, no demolition hammers, no saber saws, no goggles and gloves and pussy nonsense. Always one rung short, ladder overextended, always the body contorted, juggling in space. Clean suit, clown suit of stained t-shirt, torn pants, cap blued from bleach, a blinding back spray to paint the face. Always the slick roof and the spot too far for the brush, no insurance ever, and having to reach that spot somehow regardless. Always the mumbled incantations of the tribe for failed solace, ruined strength, homage, soffit, fascia, eve, bargeboard, and flashing. And always the twists of wind when still day needed, rain when clear sky promised, punishing sun when instructions read cool shade. Always doing it again against the calendar of decay, the race against the flaking and the rot, the crack, the break, the blood, always a year older, stiffer, slower, and the end of each done day. Always behind, the fuck up you didn't see coming and the extra cost you can't afford. Loosening a bootlace, loosening another, trembling to free yourself just like the old man did. Always the work and what it gets you, what it got him. And here's another bleak one for you. That does have the catchy title of 1956 to 2018. When the phone buzzed on the quilt of the king-size bed to announce the death, we were up already enjoying the sun, punishing in another hour. Risen over the marsh, the gurgle of receded tide, a raccoon, enormous, blackened with mud, crossing labyrinth of sludge into the tall blades. A painted bunting, a male, the one you want, anxious at the feeder. That was before the phone's headline, those 6 terse words in turn before our B&B's breakfast of eggs Benedict and squeezed juice, dark coffee, seasonal melon and berries, and much smallish talk of the day arrived and what it might offer. For us, a pod of dolphins at the pier, their joyous formations, but also the thing hauled on the hook, shark or ray or something else, left wheezing to die, bulbous eye frantic and confused. The urgent lovemaking of afternoon, the bathing, wine, good novel, ritual hour on the breezing balcony. At the restaurant, sweet local shrimp sticky and hot on our fingers, and 6 words receded but palpable on the hours. More words had joined them from many halting voices. Tomorrow we were going home, a long day on the road, God willing, without mishap. In the night, a distant storm of lightning, far enough to be beautiful. As my wife slept, I counted the seconds between explosions until the show was over. That is about Anthony Bourdain, by the way, if you didn't catch the dates. Here's the title poem of the book. And this will be our last word on pork and sacrament, I guess, for the day. This is Worship the Pig. Holy loin, blessed shoulder, belly, fat back cutlet, sacrament of rib, ham, jowl, and hock. Snout to tail, border to border, sing loud of head cheese, pickled foot, crispy ear of pancetta, lardo, prosciutto, of sausage and casing. Holy phrases, denomination of bacon, order of the rump, sect of the crown rib, deep cult of the crackling. All praise be thy earthly flesh, thy sweet white fat, well salted, prepared for our good and greasy consumption. Turn on spit for the faithful, buried in a hot covered grave, tended by priestly ritual in a pit of smoking embers. Pig oink, split belly with blade, pig squeal, sever head, pig die. We love the blood, bone, blackened skin, love the pig. We dance, we pray, we dig in. Bow to table, we raise the wondrous flesh to lips. Eat and thanks, pig hallelujah. It's hard to read because the dog just came in and lay here at my feet and she's sighing as I'm reading the poems. I'm not sure what kind of review that's supposed to be, but it is a little bit distracting, I will tell you. So it's okay, baby, it's okay. When I was in Brazil, I started writing these little skinny poems, and I didn't know really where they came from, and I'm not quite sure what I should call them. I should think up some classy name, I guess, but they're largely lyrical, and I think there's a lot about compression and pacing. And I'll share one of them with you. It's called Something for Monday. It can't always be full artillery. The flame leapt hungry beyond the pit. Not every time the handshake become a fist through glass. charred flesh under the knife, lips tattooed in blood. The bottle versus the wall, the aria silenced by the curse. Not always the heat at your neck, the night a permanent stain, on your knees in the dirt braying like a dog, and none answers. Sometimes the vacant breeze, the measured gesture, careful hand and steady spoonful, the wide and unaccusing sky, a silent voice controlling each word that could and could not be spoken. But I wrote quite a few of those, and they were fun to write. I'll finish with this poem, and this is the last poem in the book. And it's a poem about returning, and I meant to look up the quote exactly, but you may know the Neruda quote is something like, the poet's job is to leave and to return. And again, in some ways, that's the narrative of this book as well, but that's from a world, as I said, that doesn't seem to exist at the moment. But I'll share this with you too. This is a poem about, a lot of my books end with poems about homecoming, more or less. And thanks very much for your attention this afternoon. I appreciate it. There's a lot of good poetry coming up here after I'm done. This is called Hummingbird Moonflower. The emerald hummingbird flits from bloom to bright bloom of the red brush vine, effusive with blossom. Hovering, it dips its needle in one cup of sweetness after another. With such speed, such trembling joy, there hardly seems time for a sip before it stabs at the next, and the next, and the one after. A dizzying display, until a larger hummingbird, swallow-tailed and dark in a squeaking blur, races the smaller away, then perches over a bounty that could satisfy 100 such thirsts. Here ends the lesson. But did I mention that when I woke this morning, a note had arrived, just a few words to tell me it was time to come home, that the moonflower I love, oddly dormant all summer, would bloom tomorrow, one of those blousy, silky flowers, ghostly pale in the moonlight, perfect one night, that it had waited for me. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you so much, Gaylord. I appreciate your work because I'm thinking about American Horror Story and Roanoke. So if any of the listeners, viewers out there are taking it in, I think that you know exactly what I'm talking about. And isn't all poetry, when it's done so well, just something that is so evocative and brings you to old and new places. So I really appreciate that so much. Thank you. So up next, we're looking forward to hearing from you, Sandra. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Malaprops, for having us. And it's an honor to get to read here with Gaylord and Meghan. So I'm going to read 4 poems from Still, which I'm just fixing my view here. So I'm going to read 4 poems from Still. This first one needs a visual aid. So there are a lot of different creatures in this book, and their presence and their absence is here. And this first one is about the tongue-eating isopod. And so this creature is the only known parasite that actually can consume and replace the limb of a living creature. So apologize if any nightmares happen tonight, but if you haven't seen them before, this is what the tongue-eating louse looks like, replacing the tongue of the fish. And so the isopod will spend its life there with the fish. If the fish dies first, then you'll go on and get another host fish. So this is a persona poem from the perspective of the tongue-eating isopod addressing their host. And I think the only other thing I need to mention here Well, maybe a couple things. There's a pill bug that's mentioned. That's just the little bug, the roly-poly. And also another fun fact about the tongue-eating isopod, they have 5 sets of jaws. Still with severed tongue, Simathoa exigua, tongue-eating isopod, and Lujanus guttatus, spotted rose snapper. Did you feel it, that first prick at your throat, at my arrival's muscled root, finale to parting your gills frilled arc as smoothly as a hand slips into the silk slit of a girl's sleeve? How I hummed your heart's double-chambered thrum, all my jaws aching me on. Vessel by vessel, I sawed with a grace surgical and determined, bathed anew each gasp. Wasn't I wrapped in the blood of abandon, a sustenance never meant to sustain? Thus, I was eager for atrophy, the late stage withering, your unstrung tongue drifting down to the fire coral, blades burnt gold and white-tipped as ash, or the needle eye of flame. There, it was set upon by others no longer my concern. Their dawn rose blush, gold ellipses stippling the silvered scallops of their scales. I, wanting nothing but to ride your liquid pitch as you troll the mounded, opalescent ledge for what darts from its kinks and dark crevices. When I latched your sweet stub for good, why, at that dearest jointing, did you owe your mouth, though nothing swam near to feed us? Only that slow undulation, twisting above coral, all mouth and anus and sting, extended tentacles fine as a boy's faintest chin hairs. If you are host, am not I the master mistress of ceremonies, oracle to your priest? Am not I poles from my brethren who ride their lives out on the surface of a face, never getting beneath the skin, the scales? Benign, symbiotic, meaning too timid to cut in. Poles from my land-stranded cousin, pillbug, that fear helmets to a ball small as the eraser of the pencil any grubby child might poke it with. Hyphen and hinge to your hunger satisfied. Didn't I heal the wound I cleaved you to? Still, you would dream it, blooded and pulsing, eel sleek, branched high in the staghorn, ululating the duration. But isn't dullness a kind of relief, living as the flip side of serration? And don't I have dominion over the fish of the sea, banishing even your burgeoning phantom limb from this vaulted chapel I lie in? Because you did not take the bait descending from sky hung on a wire dyed the exact cerulean of the shallows that held you through aftermath. What came from sea itself, from the very waters that rocked you, from which you could not at once have sealed yourself safe and breathed. All your life now, I will be the live thing ghosting you from inside. The slick of my eyes, last vision for prey or for kind, whomever you open your mouth to, as if you might speak. This second poem is also about an encounter with a reef creature. This is a very different one, the Caribbean reef squid. So just a couple of fun facts about the reef squid. The reef squid has the largest eye to body ratio of any animal in the animal kingdom. They have these just enormous, gorgeous eyes. And they also have the ability to change skin color in elaborate patterns. And it's not just for camouflage, it's for communication with each other. So a reef squid, so they swim in these small groups, can actually on one side have one pattern of color giving a message to this guy over here, and on the other side have a completely different pattern saying something to the one over here. Let's see, I should mention that the goby that comes into the poem as well. Goby is a tiny fish that you might see just poking its head out from a brain coral. Still life with Caribbean reef squid. Sepia toothes, sepioidea. What swam back from the dough damp eye? Your own goggled face, unfinished as the gobies you treaded sea against the surf surging, to witness emerge from its brain coral cave, that fogged head-on perspective, rendering it simple beyond its being. A gas-masked gesture drawing, cross-hatched to shadows. As against high cotton rag paper, stroke by stroke, you remember a man who sketched you as you slept, packing on charcoal until it approximated the darkness the face meant to rise against. You saw it before you knew its name, knowing only the creature had seen you, knowing this only by its quick disappearance. But the squid do not startle. Fins rippling, sleek bodies gleaming, liquid as wax sprung from the head cavity of a sperm whale, sparked to specter the flame it would wick to only when the knives were docked. Their arms extend, mimicking sargassum weed. Hovering, though you know what's coming, still it surprises how sudden the unfurling, the arms flash flowering to star anemone, how fierce they're drilling the dark pockets for what harbored in the hope refuge might lie in a bed of hard corals. How you trailed this ravenous unfolding, shadowing their trolling the fringe reef, iridescent, crushed pearl mounds, studded with fan corals, lavender and lime, royal blue, waved from stiff wrists of holdfasts by leeward's muted, moon-driven surf. Dusky anchovy, hard head, silver sides, shrimp, dwarf herring, all things soft, devoured, all things armored, discarded, head, ribs, vertebral column, a single unsheathing. To walk on water is to miss this world by half. This immersion taught you. No alarms, gold brightening, no brick red of retreat, no diversion of ink clouding their swerve into distance. Like sequins cast in organza veils, a spray of sinkers woven to fishing nets' translucence. They signed, each to each, in shimmering chromatics you could read only as radiance, diminishment, propelling you on. Whether hours or minutes, you could not say. You followed, then led to the coral's fossil-strewn shore. The shell of you returned. This next poem is a univocal poem. So a univocal or monovocal poem is one that uses only a single vowel. So you can use all the consonants, but the only vowel it can use is the one that it selects. And this one uses the I. In this poem, the speaker is an older woman addressing a younger girl with some relationship advice. Still with I. Girl inscribing in night, lightning's sizzling trill, whittling and pitch this bright wiring, its divining sticks split, kindling his witching wick, his birdish ribs, wishes then fit. Girl, this wild, which births limb, twining limb, will still spirit chill. Flirts flit, stilling in flint. Girl mimicking his wit's gimmick, chiming his insist, his is, his isn't, kinking his whip, kinging him with rings, with in thick, in thin, with pink icings, gilding scrim. In blinks, hitch is pinch, listing and wind, his riffing wrists silk. Instincts first high, diminishing in fifths. Girl skirting lightning, shrinking thin, thirst circling his brim. I isn't I, if middling in him. If hindsight is insight, biding its timing, might is might. Girl still rinsing in light, this spring's still high. Girl, sink, swim. The final poem that I'll read is about a plant, the bloodroot that grows here in southern Appalachia. And it has ephemeral flowers that bloom right at the beginning of spring and quickly are gone. The seeds of the bloodroot have oil bodies that provide food for the local ants, who in turn disperse those seeds and so help its propagation. But there is a rapid increase of the invasive ant, the fire ant, and the fire ant destroys the seed, and so is one of the reasons for the fragility of the future of the bloodroot. The bloodroot also is rarely found in disturbed landscapes. Still life with bloodroot, Sanguinaria canadensis. Brain-veined, cabbaged around a single bud, embarrassed canopy, your one winged leaf unfurls to a lemon crown of anthers, to ghost white petals quick thinning to translucence, to capsule unzipping its pod of purse seeds, nut brown, glossy as tiger eye, eliosome's umbilical froth, coiling each globed bead. The dormant future figured as apple and worm, though your whole is generative. Even these filmy members, winnow ants, copper baubles, spider wired to filigree, feed their young, leaving the seed to sprout from nest debris. There are those who thrive in margins, who survive the wild shrinking. Coyote, raccoon, dandelion, fire ants, overrunning forest and field, who take the bait but destroy the seed. Outsiders, how can we help but hunger? Bloodroot, you unscroll to the staggered world of fence posts, no new flowers. Your given name, a study and slicing, a clotted root to bleed. This world so beautiful, we could eat you whole. Bloodroot, redroot, tetherwort, sweet slumber, nest, I call you by, scouting your woods. Whether as winnow or fire, I come to you. What begins each spring, one more vanishing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I really appreciate that imagery, and I've learned a lot now about sea creatures today, and you've added to my repertoire. I'm kind of creeped out, but in a very artistic, a poetic way. So I think job well done as a poet, and I want to thank you so much for that. Up next is our final author today who's reading, and that will be Meghan Sterling. Meghan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Patricia. It's wonderful to be here. I'm going to be reading from my first collection, These Few Seeds. I live in Maine now, but I met my husband in Asheville, and we lived in Asheville for 6 years before moving to Maine with our small daughter to be near family. But there's one poem in this collection that I wrote in Asheville that for me is the start of the collection, even though it's not the first poem. My daughter was, not even a year old when I wrote this poem, and she just turned 4. So this poem is called Still Life with Snow. It fell away, that slant of light that followed us across the North Sea, across a stable yard, hoof marks sunk into the frozen mud. The way the barn cut the night in two, the hay steaming, the chickens asleep at the roost. I had dreamt us before we ever came to be, clutching the coals like a talisman against the bruising of old dreams, against the inevitable age that would grip us in its fulsome mouth. A dog in the yard, mawing its one mean bone. And what sky was left was hollowed moon and piecemeal as a memory of what I thought I could be, if only love would find me, traveling the Arctic of my heart, gnawing its white bone. So this is my first collection, and I think like a lot of first collections, it captures the various lives that I've lived up until the point that I released the book. A lot of travel, and then pregnancy and giving birth to my daughter. And at that moment, the old me died, and this new me, this mother, was born. And I feel like this collection is a lot about these various selves. Also, there's a backdrop of climate catastrophe, as there is in a lot of my work, which is, of course, even more urgent now that I have this small daughter to maneuver through this world until she's ready to do it on her own. So my daughter, she's my little hero. And this is a poem that I wrote early on as well, called Weaning. Weaning. No longer cleaving your black and white shape in the infrared light, monitor box set on the coffee table as I try to busy myself to remember who I was before you were me. Accustomed to your scent each night, your body alongside mine, only an arm's length, your hair just washed in our bath, my vigil of putting us both to sleep in each other's arms. I'm told that this should be a small grief, so small, like your tender body, the weight of you scented with powder, grinning into my mouth, your tears in my mouth, exclaiming the nearness of my breast in your half sleep, grasping it with both hands. It was your sweat on my hands, your drool on my chest, your mouth opening wide to engulf me. That is the way I used to feel about love, which you've revived in me. She's playing outside right now. So as I read this poem, I hear these little yippies coming through the window. It's pretty delightful. So I traveled a lot in my previous life. And this is a poem about one of the many travels. Memory is a Greek island. Memory is a Greek island, twisted in the red dust, blue anemones, gray olives, green figs, keeled over in Aegean winds. Here I declared my love of open spaces. Snapshot of hair blown into sculpture after a day of walking. Snapshot of moonlight on the sea, still cold from remembering winter. Snapshot of 6 nuns in blue habits, laughing in the bed of a new pickup truck, careening over the rocky trail down to Parakia. Every village, a different arrangement of white stone, blue doors, and blue sky. Sky that swallowed all sound into itself like a church. We were still friends then, before we fell into too much space. Here, the wind blew salt over the fields of rock, and we learned the plants like a new language, dianthus, lantana, kite flower, as we climbed the hill to see the ships come into the harbor. I decided here to love all that I was given, no matter how much it hurt. So I found being pregnant to be a very strange experience. I had my daughter at 38. So I had a different, older awareness. And I've written a lot of poems about being pregnant because it was a fascinating journey. And so this poem is called Bliss. A mountain inside me, a fish. I never thought I could stomach giving birth, the very thought. Still, you swam, you whaled my flesh, stretching the very silt of me until I was star-marked. Blood vessels burst in a constellation, heralding your arrival across my chest. All the day before, I felt the sea of you rock and rock and rock until the pain began, until you insisted it was time for me to be more than me. So you rode your wave out slowly. I creaked like an old boat when you slipped a just caught minnow into our hands. My body then began its deflation, while my heart began to grow big and bright, like the heart in the middle of the page when I write, Mama loves you, and you color it red with your bold and earnest strokes. And so this poem is where it all intersects. This poem is called How to Travel Alone. How to travel alone. You must be ready for long silences, trouble finding bathrooms, short, intense attachments to strangers, the attention of unsavory men. Bring moleskin to cover blisters, an unlined journal, pens that won't bleed in shifting cabin pressure, tarot cards to guide the journey. Prepare to hear the stories of other lonely travelers and grow to love those stories. Use them as if they are your own. Begin to forget they aren't yours. Learn of your grandmother's death while in Helsinki. Grieve along the smooth gray rocks at the shore. Throw stones into the sea and imagine they are piercing the veil between you. Get invited into a Swedish home for Passover. Encourage British children in a timeshare in Portugal to henna your hair. Run your fingers through loose bones in a pitch-dark catacomb. Lose yourself in busy cafes and be surprised by who you see in the mirror. Feel so alone your skin aches. Over quinoa soup, regale an Australian couple with descriptions of the American North. Wharves, streets caked with ice like ash, the ocean a bottomless black all winter. Forget the times you turned away from a shadowed alley, from an outstretched hand, the times you were afraid. Let those untaken paths remind you of the choices that brought you right here, your luggage gathering dust. Of course, for most of us, our luggage is gathering dust and might be for a while to come, which is really hard as a traveler. So poetry is how I travel in my daily life, right? Let's see. Yeah, so many of the poems I read a lot of poetry about my daughter because there's so many things that I want to remember. I'll have these moments, and a photograph doesn't quite do it because the photograph captures the image, but it doesn't capture how I felt. And the poem captures how I felt. So this is a poem that I wrote about a moment with my daughter. It's called Puddle Jumping. It's so brief, her small hand reaching for mine, reflexively as if my hand grew out of the earth wherever she is and needs steadying, as if my hand were banister, tree branch, root. We ready ourselves. Ladybug rain boots with the big gash in the rubber, flowered raincoat just now too short in the arms. She dashes forward on unsteady legs, seeking the puddles as if thirst drove her. The biggest one gathers at the grate, flecked with orange dirt, like iron rust that glows beneath the rushing. She wants me near her, to delight with her, to exclaim that this puddle is big, this puddle is dirty, this puddle is cold. As she stumbles, she splashes, she seeks my hand in the air. And she's still doing that. I still have those moments. And I'm savoring them as much as the exhaustion will let me. So I'm originally from South Florida. I've lived in Asheville. I've lived in a lot of places, but we're here in Maine now, and Maine is our home. And I'm always struggling to love winter. Like I want to love it, but I have to work on that every year. And so this is a poem that I wrote last February. It's going to be in my next collection. And this poem is called After Reading Keats's Ode on Melancholy in late February. No, don't throw yourself under the hood of the tanning booth or spend your nickels on cheap fashions just to alleviate ennui. You will still slip on ice when you go out to your car, your black coat crusted in salt from brushing against its once blue exterior. You can attempt refuge, get in that car and drive south, maybe reach New Hampshire. The roads will keep coughing up soot. The dust will still weave itself inside the white ribbons of the snowbanks, the silver walls of the guardrails moving like the ocean just beyond sight. You must remind yourself it's only 5 weeks until April, a month whose name always delights, despite what Mr. Eliot said, a month that promises change. Hard little buds like teeth appearing on the tips of branches, the blossoms on the cherry trees, a pink smack in the mouth. And though you are still under the weight of February, avoid the wine, gin, vodka, tequila, chocolate, pasta, the loaves and fishes that call your name as you pace the apartment like a rat in the night. No, this is a month for asking questions when things get hard. Where do you go when all around you is frozen sharp like the inside of an oyster shell. How many ways can you describe gray? How about ice? Who are you when the light has gone? When your neighbors' roofs are buckling beneath heavy snow? You must find out. Put down the ice cream. Fall on your face in the ice. Taste deep of the ashes left in the can. The only way out is through. And I'm going to read one more. This is another love poem to my daughter that takes place in winter, because that's what I'm feeling as I watch her cavorting outside. Where did it go? Before school, there are icicles. Before school, there are icicles clattering on the frosted snow, a dozen of them that gave way and fell together, music like tin chords on strings of wind, microscopic piano notes ringing across the tunnel between buildings, and we are delighted. Echo of winter morning, sharper for all the lonely air, no birds to fill the sky, no clouds, only the vibrant blue like our heads thrown back, branches encased in ice completely as though struck by a spell, and we sing. The sky is a million mirrors. The sky wears the tips of the branches like the diamond frills of the Elizabethans, and we crown it queen. Shadow of sun across the glass driveway, and I try to nudge my daughter toward the car, playing freeze tag, desperate not to slip. She asks for icicles to suck, so we leap from tree to tree as I break off the dangling bits, cold threatening to cut exposed skin, flesh of my hands raw, each tender icicle like a finger prick of good for her to taste, something of the tree in it, something of the sky. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan. I was thinking about all of the connections that the three of you made today. And of course, Gaylord, you referenced a poem that you wrote about your father that you didn't think he read. And then Megan is writing these poems about her daughter, which, maybe she will read them. I know it's been wonderful to think about them and that parent-child connection. It's really present of mind for me. And then I did say this earlier, but I think it does bear repeating that I'm thinking a lot about food now too. And I think Sandra and Gaylord have done this to me. And the shrimp, that's coming to mind for sure. I'm thinking about that. And Gaylord, when you said there's going to be some illustrations connected to your poetry, I nominate Jesus and Elvis rolled together.
Okay, as a possibility.
Okay, that would be, since I don't even know if you're taking nominations, but I nominate.
I'll pass the word along. Thank you. Thank you.
Please, Elvis is near and dear to my heart, and I've been to Graceland, so I'd like to see that. When we're in these last few moments that we have together before the top of the hour, I wonder if you all would be comfortable talking a little bit about your process, because I think that as a person who's not a poet, and for those of us who are all together listening to your poetry this afternoon, you're all very mysterious sometimes in how you make this happen. So would you feel comfortable, the three of you, taking a moment to talk about how do you write poetry and what do you need to do to make that?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll start since I went first here. And very briefly, nothing terribly profound to report. I was thinking about recently in a different context. I was thinking about what I need to be able to write poems. And for me, it's a pretty simple combination of silence, stillness, and time. And if I have those three in some kind of equal proportion, because lately I've had a lot of time, but I haven't had a lot of the others have been very sporadic, and it's not a good recipe. And other than that, I don't know that I have anything much to report. I write in the mornings now as I've gotten older, and exclusively in the mornings. But yeah, if I have those elements, that's pretty much all I need. If I have a window to look out of, that's just gravy. So maybe you'll have something a little more useful to say. I don't know.
I completely agree. I would just maybe add to that. Also, good poetry to read, because I think it is, such an in-out sort of process. I also write in the mornings and find that really useful, sort of before all the anxieties of the day kind of take over. And I think just showing up, at a regular pace. I try to write most mornings, and sometimes nothing happens, and sometimes I'll move things around on a page and feel like, oh, well, something happened there. But it's just showing up and seeing what kinds of things might come together.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo all of that. I get up super early so that I can have some time in the morning before my daughter wakes up and becomes the whole world. But I mean, I feel like poets, our brains work a certain way. And I feel like we share that. We're a little odd, and the way we make connections between things, it isn't like prose. It's not all about the complete story, right? I feel like we tell a lot of pieces of stories. And we create stories by piecing together seemingly discordant things. But I think that, again, reading great poems that move you, and kind of flexing those muscles, showing up every day, and writing into the silence is all crucially important. And, for me, poetry is how I move my thoughts and emotions. It's like, for me, it's like exercise in a way. It's something I do every day to keep myself, moving forward in my life. And, if there's poetry that you love, if you read enough of it, you'll find that poems start to come from you. It's a language you kind of learn, and then you invent your own. That's what we all do, right? But so I understand the mysteriousness of it. And I think it is mysterious until you sit down to do it, and you do it, and you do it for years. And then suddenly it's not so mysterious anymore.
Okay, I'll take your word for it, Megan. I definitely, and I not only will take your word for it, I made notes while each of you read. So I found that there are things that all of you said, and other poets that you mentioned, and turns of phrases that I just thought were so unique and clarifying. That's what makes POETRIO so wonderful, and it's the alchemy among the three poets that I'd love to say we planned it. And maybe Mildred had that in mind. I can't ask her right now, but I will, because the three of you together today have created something new and unique. And I want to thank you all for not only sharing your poetry, but bringing yourselves and your creative process to the event, because I think it makes it all the more special, and it tells us a little bit about each of you and the way you see the world, even the minutia to the large part. I didn't have a raven, but I had a crow, and so now I'm going to close out and thank you all for being here for POETRIO. I want to thank Gaylord Brewer, Sandra, Meek, and Meghan Sterling for being the poets who composed POETRIO today. And I wish all of our guests and our poets a lovely afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's fun.